Okay, hi everyone.
You're good to go.
Uh,
Thank you.
okay, great, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Bella Seberg, and I'll be presiding over the trial today. So whenever the parties are ready to go ahead with pretrial stuff, please feel free.
Your Honor, permission to make appearances before the court.
Sure.
Good afternoon. My name is Tanya Christou, and along with my co-counsel, Cole Hastings.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
And Beau Marlette.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
We will be representing the plaintiff in today's case, the estates of Genesis Petrillo. Your Honor, prior to coming into trial today, you should have received all stipulations, rules of evidence, all relevant case law. And at this time, I would move to constructively tender these documents to the bench.
Yes, thank you. And I want to let the parties know that I have them pulled up on a screen like above this one. So if I'm looking up, that's why I'm looking at my ballot and everything. So I do have them. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. Next, since this is our first time in Your Honor's virtual courtroom, would you like us to screen share exhibits prior to their admittance into evidence or after they have already been admitted?
Prior, please.
Your Honor, I would also want to point your attention to the fact that there are two charges that we could have pursued in today's case. We are choosing to pursue battery.
I understand. Thank you.
Next, I would like to invoke Rule 608, the constructive swearing in of all witnesses. I would also like to invoke Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of all witnesses barring party representatives.
Okay, in defense, do you have a party representative that'll be here with you?
Yes, Your Honor, the party representative is Mr. Harper Martini.
Thank you.
Finally, I would like to point your attention to Stipulation 3, which states that Exhibits 1 through 10 have been previously admitted prior to trial.
Defense, is that your understanding as well?
Yes, Your Honor, it is.
Thank you.
Nothing further.
Okay, great. Defense?
Yes, permission to make appearances?
Please.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Julia Robertson, and I, along with my co-counsels, Lauren Sager.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
And Aaron Cooper.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Rise on behalf of Harper Martini in the case at bar. Your Honor, the defense would like to make the court aware of the case of Nugent versus Peel, which states that the plaintiff has must prove the defendant's breach of the statute is a direct and proximate cause of the plaintiff's harm, and that the actions of the defendant or the failure to act of the defendant would, my apologies, stumbling on my words, that but for the defendant's actions, the cause the harm against the plaintiff would not have occurred.
Plaintiff, do you have a word on that?
Your Honor, that is our understanding as well.
In addition to this, the defense would also like to make the court aware of the case of Burdett v. Copenhaver, which lists the elements of civil battery to include the act by the defendant, the intent to cause harmful or offensive contact on part of the defendant, and that there was harmful or offensive contact to the plaintiff.
Plaintiff, any word?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you.
And with that, the defense is ready to proceed.
Okay, great. Plaintiff, whenever you're ready for opening statement, go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, Your Honor, members of the jury. We are here today because Harper Martini reached his boiling point. And when he reached his boiling point, a young man, Genesis Petrillo, lost his life. What you'll hear today is that all Genesis wanted to do was to get married to the love of his life, Casey Soto, the daughter of Harper. But you'll also hear that Harper couldn't stand the idea of his only child being taken away from him, and by someone who he hated, someone who he considered a pest that he wanted to get rid of. Now, Genesis and his fiancée, Casey, were planning on getting married at the place where they first set eyes on each other, the Rosie and Pedro winery. And after that, they were planning to move abroad together. But what you'll hear is that Harper wouldn't let this happen. Instead of letting them have their own wedding in their dream venue, instead, Harper insisted that it be held in his own winery so that he could have control over every aspect of the wedding planning. But what you'll hear is that Genesis wouldn't let him do this. And that's when the fights ensued. And whether it was over decorations for the wedding or the way that Casey should live her life, things were tense between these two. With every fight and every snide comment, things escalated between them until it got to the point of no return. And all of this conflict culminated in one singular event, the rehearsal dinner, the boiling point. You'll hear that Harper presented a bottle of wine to Genesis, and this was a special bottle of wine. But what poor Genesis didn't know is that the special ingredient in this particular bottle of wine was poison, and that drinking it would mean the end of his life altogether. Because when Harper reached his boiling point, Genesis paid the price. And that is why we, as the plaintiff, are bringing a claim of battery against Harper. And what this means is we must prove to you that it is more likely than not that several elements are true. The first of these elements is that Harper intentionally mixed insecticides into the Cara bottle of wine. The second is that when Harper poisoned this wine, he did so to harm Genesis. And lastly, we must prove to you that it was in drinking this Cara bottle of wine that Genesis died. And in order to prove these elements to you today, we will be calling 3 witnesses to the stand. The first witness we will call is Mr. Angel Rodriguez, a close friend of Genesis. You'll hear from Mr. Rodriguez about the many fights that would happen between Harper and Genesis. And you'll hear about a particular argument on the night of the rehearsal dinner. You'll also hear that on that night, Mr. Rodriguez saw no one else drink that bottle of wine, except for the one sip that he had himself, but that he spit out because it tasted funny. Now, next, we will call Dr. Kwan to the stand, who is the chief emergency physician at River Valley Hospital, and the person who was attending the emergency room when Genesis was brought in. Now, you'll hear about his analysis of his symptoms and how he saw, while originally the symptoms presented themselves to be alcohol poisoning, they escalated and got much more severe. And that's how he knew that it was organophosphate poisoning. And you'll learn that he confirmed this diagnosis through the test that he was able to run on Genesis's body. And lastly, you'll hear from Mrs. Sam Arnold, who is the caterer of this wedding. You'll hear more from Sam Arnold about the many fights between Harper and Genesis. And you'll hear how Harper was sure to designate the Cara bottle of wine just for Genesis to drink alone, and that it was something he believed would make their problems go away forever. You'll also hear that Sam noted insecticide in the kitchen, and that when she brought it up to Harper, his reply was it was to get rid of pests like Genesis. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we will prove to you today that Harper intentionally mixed pesticides in the Cara bottle of wine, which poisoned Genesis. Because when Harper reached his boiling point, Genesis paid the price. And that is why, at the conclusion of today's trial, we will get up here and ask that you find the only justifiable verdict in today's case, and that you find Harper liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hastings. Opening for the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Erin Cooper, and today, along with my co-counsels, Lauren Sager and Julia Robertson, we will be representing the defendant in today's case, Mr. Harper Martini. Today, the spotlight has been put on the wrong suspect. Plaintiff told you a tale as old as time, issues with the in-laws. And while the tension between Harper and Genesis is beyond doubt, the love Harper had for Casey, his only daughter, is indisputable. Harper would not do anything so heinous to hurt his own child. In fact, Harper loved his child so much that he withheld a secret from Casey that would have ended the wedding he dreaded weeks ago. What Harper knows that no one else does is that Genesis was having a love affair with Casey's best friend, Drew Matsaukis. And Drew Matsaukis is the suspect the spotlight should have been on. If the plaintiffs had done their due diligence, they would have come to that conclusion too. For Harper to poison Genesis, it meant risking the business he had spent his whole life towards, and more importantly, hurting who he loved the most. Harper had tried making peace with Genesis multiple times, and providing the Cara wine was his last attempt, but Drew took it from him. The defense today will provide you with 3 witnesses, all of which will prove Harper's innocence and dive deeper into the guilt of Drew Matsaukis. First will be Blair Osborne, the wedding planner for the Soto Petrillo wedding. She will testify to the love Harper had for his child Casey and how much time he put into making their wedding perfect. She will also tell you how Drew had been in close proximity to Genesis as she was drinking the Cara wine. Second witness, Dr. Cannon, will testify and raise doubt on the plaintiff's expert witness, Dr. Kwan's theory. Lastly, the defendant himself, Harper Martini, will take the stand and tell you his side of the story, the true side. Plaintiff will and has already wasted its time proving that Harper and Genesis did not like each other. In order to prove Harper Martini guilty of committing battery, they will need to, without reasonable doubt, that he purposely poured pesticide into the bottle of Cara wine. Not one of their witnesses will be able to testify to seeing with their own eyes Harper Martini pouring pesticide into a bottle of wine. Instead, their witnesses will help us further our case that the spotlight was put on the wrong suspect. Harper had the love for his child and his business that would never allow him to harm Genesis. Drew, on the other hand, had jealousy and frustration that motivated him to poison the person he wanted no one else to have. At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Lauren Sager, will come to you and ask you to rule in our favor. I ask you to do the same. Do not allow Genesis's justice to go unserved by allowing the spotlight to be put on the wrong suspect. Thank you.
Thank you. Plaintiff, you can go ahead and set up for your next witness. Just give us a moment to finish our ballots here. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Your Honor, the plaintiff calls our first witness, Angel Rodriguez, to the stand. Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good afternoon. My name is Angel Rodriguez.
Mr. Rodriguez, what do you do for a living?
I am a kindergarten teacher at Rapid River Valley Elementary School here in Midlands.
And how are you involved in this case?
Well, Genesis was one of my best friends, and I was also the one who had to call 911 for Genesis when he got sick. And I was the one who had to tell Casey, his fiance, that he had fallen into a coma, which was the worst day of my life.
Mr. Rodriguez, how did you meet Genesis?
I met Genesis in 2016 through a mutual friend, and I also met Casey the same day, and we were inseparable. Genesis was the type of person that could make anyone feel welcomed, and Genesis and Casey were just a really good couple.
What was Miss Soto and Mr. Petrillo's relationship like?
The two were inseparable. They were perfect for each other, and they obviously loved each other a lot. I just wish they could have lived their dreams out together.
Mr. Rodriguez, now, I know this is hard for you, but let's talk about June 7th, 2019. What happened that day?
June 7th was the rehearsal dinner and the night that Genesis passed away.
Did you see Genesis that day?
Yeah, I was with him a lot that night. He even sat next to me during the rehearsal dinner because of a little fight that he was having with Casey.
What was that fight about?
Well, it was more so a fight between Genesis and Harper. Earlier in the day, Harper had gone up to Genesis and told him that he should just leave and save this family the headache. Otherwise, I will make you disappear.
Did anything else happen between Harper and Genesis before the rehearsal dinner?
Yeah, Genesis was worried about the comment that Harper made, so he confronted Harper about it. But Harper grabbed Genesis's arm and pulled him into the hallway. When Genesis came back, I asked him what had happened, and he said that I should keep away from Harper, and also that he is afraid that Harper is going to kill
Objection,
him.
hearsay.
Plaintiff responds to the hearsay objection.
Yes, Your Honor. This falls under 8033, under the I am afraid comment from Genesis. This shows a then existing mental condition, as Harper had just pulled him into the hallway and grabbed him. He was reacting to that in a timely manner.
Ms. Robertson, response.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. This was not made in a time of fashion that the Genesis Petrillo was in any immediate danger. Therefore, it does not fall under the exception that it was an excited utterance.
Your Honor.
One second, Ms. Robertson, can you, I think Ms. Christo is talking about it being a then existing mental state under 8033. So could you respond to that?
Well, yes, Your Honor. My response would be that sorry, just a clarification question that the testimony that was heard was that Genesis was feeling afraid of Harper.
Your Honor.
That's my understanding, Ms. Christo.
Yes,
Okay.
it's the statement where Genesis says, I am afraid.
Okay, no further objection, Your Honor.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Allow me to re-ask my question. Did anything else happen between Harper and Genesis before the rehearsal dinner?
Yes, so Genesis confronted Harper about the comment that he made, but Harper grabbed Genesis's arm and yanked him into the hallway. And once Genesis came back, I asked him what had happened. And Genesis said that I should stay away from Harper. And he also said that I'm afraid that Harper is going to kill me if I'm not careful.
How did Genesis react to Harper's threat?
Well, he wasn't smiling. His eyes were wide, and I could tell that he was afraid of Harper by the end of the rehearsal dinner.
Did you see Harper at any time before the dinner?
Yes, I actually did. I was walking through the hallways when I noticed that Harper was heading towards the kitchen, and I noticed that Harper had a canister labeled pesticides. And, I was curious why Harper would be bringing pesticides to the kitchen. So I asked Harper about it.
What did Harper say?
Well, I think my question kind of frazzled him at first because Harper hesitated. But then he said it is for Genesis because Genesis is such a pest. Just kidding, I guess. Lewis claims to have seen a cockroach. I'm going to go deal with it, don't worry. And then Harper walked away.
Mr. Rodriguez, allow me to direct your attention back to the rehearsal dinner. Was Mrs. Petrillo drinking that day?
Not really, which was really weird. To be fair, Genesis had like a couple sips of champagne, but I've drank with Genesis a lot in the past, and he always drank a lot during celebrations. So I was really worried that he wasn't drinking, the night before his wedding. Even asked him about it, but he just shrugged me off, and I figured that he was just bothered with the fight with Harper.
What happened next, Mr. Rodriguez?
Speeches were next, and Harper gave a speech calling Genesis a problem child, and he made really mean jokes about him, and Harper was just acting kind of like a bully, but no one was laughing, especially not Genesis.
How did Genesis react?
Genesis just got mocked in front of his closest friends and family. How do you think he would react? I glanced over at him during the speech and he was shaking.
What happened at 10 o'clock that evening?
Around 10, Harper gave Genesis a bottle of Caro wine, and Harper also gave the rest of the guests wine.
Did you also receive a bottle of Cara wine?
No, I received a bottle of Horizon wine, as did the rest of the guests. Genesis was the only person who got Cara wine.
Did you see Genesis drink the Cara wine?
I did. Genesis even offered the Cara wine to everyone at the table we were at, but no one accepted but me. And I usually love wine, but when I tried a sip of the wine, it tasted funny to me and it didn't sit well, so I spat it out before I swallowed.
Did Genesis drink a lot of the Cara wine?
Genesis had a couple glasses of the wine, but he was acting way too drunk.
What do you mean by that, Mr. Rodriguez?
Well, Genesis had only had, like I said, a couple glasses, but he was acting extremely out of it and, not all there. And he even said that I've never had this kind of feeling before. And I was extremely worried about Genesis because I've seen him drink whole bottles of wine and not even get a hangover the next day.
Objection, improper opinion. May I be heard, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Thank you. This witness is not in any way been established as someone in the medical field and would be unable to attest to certain symptoms that Genesis would be feeling based on alcohol.
Your
Respond.
Honor, if I may, we are not offering this as expert testimony. I was simply asking my witness if he had seen Genesis drink anything else that day. And then up to him, he decided to compare that to past experiences where he had seen Genesis drink before.
Ms. Robertson, any response to this being a lay opinion comparing the times that he had been drunk?
Well, Your Honor, I wouldn't necessarily contend specifically to that. I would say that this is being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, and that since he doesn't have specific knowledge as to certain symptoms of drunkenness based on professional testimony, he wouldn't be able to make that opinion in court today.
Final word from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. As we've already established, Mr. Rodriguez saw how much Genesis had to drink that day, and if I may proffer, he will go on to explain what symptoms she showed that led him to say that she was more drunk than she would have been.
Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection for now, Ms. Robertson, because I do think that Mr. Rodriguez can testify to just comparing different circumstances. But if you think that it gets even further into what you believe is medical testimony, please feel free to re-object.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Rodriguez, let me re-ask my question. What do you mean by Genesis seemed more drunk than she should have been?
So Genesis was acting really drunk, as in like Genesis was swaying and had some slurred speech, but Genesis had only had a couple glasses of wine. And he also said that this is a kind of feeling I've never felt before. And like I was saying, I was worried about Genesis because I've seen him drink whole bottles of wine and not even get a hangover the next day. So I asked him if he wanted to go up to his room to rest, but he didn't want to.
Did you see Genesis consume any other alcohol?
No. Genesis ordered tequila shots for the group we were with at the end of the night, but Genesis didn't have any of those. He only drank the Cara wine.
Who else was part of that wedding party?
Drew Mitsoukas, me, Genesis. Yeah.
From your experience, what was the relationship between Genesis and Drew Mitsoukas?
It seemed like they were friends. I knew both of them pretty well, and it seemed like they enjoyed each other up to an extent.
Now, let me ask you about what Genesis' condition was like in the hotel room.
Genesis got bad really fast. It took us 30 minutes just to get up to the hotel room, and he wouldn't stop vomiting all the way up. I even gave Genesis water, but he would just throw it up. And it was the fastest I've ever seen someone get that bad. And eventually he asked me to call 911, so I did.
What happened once the EMS took Genesis to the hospital?
I don't really remember the ride over there, but I remember just trying to hold Genesis's hand as the ambulance was racing down the road, and once we got to the hospital, I learned that Genesis had fallen into a coma and that he had been poisoned. And I knew I had to tell Casey, so I went back to the winery.
What happened next?
Well, I was at the winery and I was going to go tell Casey what had happened, but I ran into Harper. And before I could say anything to him, Harper said, Genesis got poisoned? Oh no, we'll have to cancel the wedding. Go tell Casey. Casey needs to know.
Did you share your concerns with anyone before calling 911?
No, I didn't tell anyone that I was calling 911.
And you were the only one to go to the hospital with Genesis.
Yeah, I was the only person that went.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Just give us one moment before cross, Ms. Robertson.
Absolutely, Your Honor.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Mr. Rodriguez. I just have a few questions for you, okay?
Okay.
You didn't know Casey and Genesis as well as you knew Drew Matsauskis, correct?
Well, yeah, I met Drew earlier, but over the years I've gotten to know all three of them really well.
You were never fully involved in the planning of the wedding, correct?
No, not fully.
Your
And
Honor, objection. Relevance?
Can you elaborate?
Yes. I don't see how it's relevant that my witness was part of the planning of the wedding. That was between the two parties that were getting married.
Okay, Ms. Robertson, relevance to Mr. Rodriguez being involved in the wedding planning.
yes, Your Honor, it has already been testified to that Harper Martini was closely involved in the wedding planning, and that to establish the fact that Mr. Rodriguez wasn't actively involved means he was not closely related to or able to speak specifically on the connections or the relationship between Genesis and Harper Martini.
Your Honor, if I
I
may.
agree. I'm going to overrule. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. So I'll ask that question again for you, Mr. Rodriguez. You were never fully involved in the planning of the wedding, correct?
No, I wasn't fully involved in the planning, but I knew Genesis, Harper, Casey pretty well.
You noted that Casey, Harper, and Genesis were all arguing with each other, correct?
Yeah, they fought a lot.
And you noted that everyone seemed to have kind of a short temper, correct?
Yes.
At the party on May 11th, 2019, Genesis drank too much and was throwing up, correct?
Yes, he was
And you
throwing
noted
up.
that Genesis was fairly a heavy drinker, correct?
Yes, he was. He drank a lot.
You agreed that the wine that Harper gave to Genesis was a nice gesture, correct?
Yeah, it was a nice gesture after Harper was extremely rude to Genesis in the speeches and prior to the wedding.
And you noted that it was that at the party on May 11th, you agreed. Sorry, you noticed that Genesis drank a significant amount of that wine at the rehearsal dinner, correct?
Yes, Genesis had a couple glasses of the wine.
Drew insisted that Genesis was fine, correct?
Yes, he was focusing on other stuff.
And you were aware that Drew had sprayed for pesticides around the estate, correct?
That's what Drew told me.
And you cannot, no further questions.
Okay, any redirect?
No, Your Honor. I only asked that my witness be able to step down.
Sure. And you all can set up for your second witness. Just again, give us a minute. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. The plaintiff now calls Dr. Jameen Kwan to the stand. Would you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hi, I'm Jameen Kwan, but you can just call me Jim.
What's your educational background?
Yeah, so I first went to a Georgia Tech and I majored in biology and minored in chemistry. And then I went to a UNC Chapel Hill Med School, go Heels. And finally, I went to Emory University in Atlanta for my residency.
What did you do after your residency?
Well, you see, I think learning is a lifelong pursuit. So I then went back to Emory to do my fellowship in medical toxicology.
What is it that you do for a living right now?
I am now the chief emergency room physician at a Rapid River Valley Hospital here in Midlands.
Do you have any particular specializations within your work?
Yes, medical toxicology.
And have you published any works related to medical toxicology or emergency medicine?
Yes, you can find them all on my CV page.
Now that we've heard a little bit about your educational background, I want to move on to your work itself. Could you please paint us a picture of what a typical day looks like for you?
Yeah, it's a whirlwind, to be honest with you. So, first, I'm a doctor, first and foremost. So, I see patients, I treat patients, I diagnose patients, and that's my main goal is to make sure that they get better. But also, being the chief emergency room physician, every doctor in the hospital, every nurse in the hospital, everybody in the hospital except me works under me. So, I have to supervise them as well.
And do you use any sort of methodology when you're diagnosing the patients that do come into the ER?
Yes, I do.
And what methodology is that?
It's called XAD.
Is this common for other physicians in your field to use?
Yes, absolutely. It's globally renowned and it is viewed as the gold standard.
Now, can you walk us through the components of this method?
Yeah, so the first is examination, the second is analysis, and the third is diagnosis.
What happens in that first stage?
Yeah, examination is right when the patient walks through the ER door. So that's right when you're laying eyes on them. So you're looking for visible symptoms. So, are they crying? If their arm is broken, is their arm dangling out of place or something? Just things that you can see with your naked eye.
What happens in the next stage, the analysis phase?
Yeah, that's where you really dig deep into the science. So at that point, you're ordering tests. So if a patient comes in and they look to be intoxicated, you run a blood alcohol content test, for example.
What happens in that last step?
That last step is where you really combine the first two steps. So you're taking what you can see with your naked eye and you're taking what the science gives you and you're taking those two and forming them into a diagnosis and then coming up with a treatment path to make sure that your patient gets, back on the path to recovery.
Now, I want to transition into how you became involved in this case. How did you meet Genesis?
Yeah, I first met Mr. Petrillo when he was brought into the emergency room.
Now, before we get into the details of that interaction, I want to clarify. Did you use the XED methodology in the case of Genesis?
Absolutely. I always use the XAD method.
And did you reliably apply this XED method?
Of course.
Shifting to the case itself, how did you begin the first step of your method?
Yeah, well, that was first, when I laid my naked eyes on Genesis. So it was just the symptoms that I could visibly see. So what I saw was that Genesis was exhibiting symptoms of nausea, vomiting, slurred speech, and he was also having a lot of trouble walking.
And what was your initial assumption from these symptoms?
Yeah, given those first four symptoms, I really thought it was a case of alcohol poisoning.
So what did you do next?
Well, at that point, I, of course, ordered a blood alcohol content test, but that's when I started seeing symptoms that just didn't sit quite right with me.
What do you mean by symptoms that didn't sit quite right with you?
Yeah, well, after those first four symptoms, the symptoms started to diverge into something that did not seem like alcohol poisoning.
Well, if it didn't seem like alcohol poisoning, what did it seem like to you?
It really seemed like organophosphate pesticide poisoning to me.
Could you explain to us what an organophosphate is?
Yeah, so an organophosphate is an insecticide, and an insecticide is meant to kill bugs. So, if it's ingested or put into the body somehow, it's obviously not good.
And how could humans come in contact with this kind of organophosphate poison?
Yeah, there's three different ways. The first is a skin to skin, so it can come into contact here or anywhere else on your body. The second is inhalation, so you're breathing it in. And then the third is ingestion, so you're swallowing it.
Did you have any way of knowing or of finding out how Genesis could have come into contact with this poison?
Yes, there was no rashes or anything of that nature, so we were able to rule out skin to skin contact. And then given the time frame, it was conclusive that it had to be ingestion.
And were the symptoms that Genesis was presenting consistent with someone who ingested organophosphate?
Yes, absolutely.
What happened next?
After that, I decided, his symptoms, my apologies, were getting very bad. There was muscle spasms, bronchospasms, which means trouble breathing and wheezing. His eyes were tearing up and his pupils were really contracted. So I was very nervous for his health at that point, and I decided to administer an organophosphate antidote.
What happened after you administered that antidote?
Unfortunately, his symptoms just progressed too much and he slipped into a coma and passed away.
What did you do after Genesis passed away?
I mean, of course, it's terrible whenever a doctor loses their patient, but I got right back into it and, decided that I had to find a conclusive diagnosis to give his family some answers.
And when you say you had to find a conclusive diagnosis, is this when you would say you moved into your last step of the method?
Yes, the diagnosis step.
And at this point, did you receive any test results that you had previously ordered?
Yes, I received the poisons and toxins analysis test, as well as the blood alcohol content test.
And what did the content of these tests tell you?
Yeah, well, the first was the poisons and toxins test. So that got back the acetylcholinesterase levels. And let me just backtrack a little bit. So you can't really tell when a patient has ingested organophosphate poisoning just through a simple blood test. It's broken down by the liver way too fast. So rather, you have to look at the acetylcholinesterase levels, which is a neurotransmitter found in the plasma. And what we found, and what science has found, is that low acetylcholinesterase levels is a very high probability that the patient has organophosphate pesticides within them. Almost conclusive.
Now, what did the other test results tell you?
The other test result was a blood alcohol content test, which showed that Genesis's blood alcohol content was a 0.16. And that certainly means that Genesis was intoxicated. But in my decades of experience, I've never seen anybody pass away from a BAC less than 0.22. In most cases, it has to be higher than a 0.25.
In your experience in toxicology, what is your knowledge of how alcohol and organophosphate can interact?
Well, you see, it's two negatives because too much alcohol is bad and getting poisoned is bad. And they don't cancel each other out or anything. It's not two negatives make a positive. It's two negatives make something doubly as worse.
Were you able to come to a final diagnosis for Genesis?
Yes, my final diagnosis was that Genesis passed away as a result of organophosphate pesticide poisoning.
And to be clear for the jury, were you able to locate the source of that poisoning?
Yes, it was the wine that he ingested.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sager, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, Dr. Kwan. I just have a few questions for you.
Okay.
You specialize in toxicology, is that correct?
Yes.
So you've treated many suspected poisoning cases, correct?
Yes, my fair share.
And would you say that pesticide use is extremely dangerous to humans?
Yes, I would.
You believe,
Especially when it's tested by humans. My apologies.
no, I apologize. You believe that organic methods are better than chemical pesticides, is that correct?
Yes, because chemical pesticides, when ingested, kill patients.
And furthermore, you believe that chemical pesticides are a scourge to the environment and you're actively pursuing legislation that would ban the use of them. Is that correct?
In my personal life, yes.
And is it not true that your convictions against chemical pesticide use, as well as your involvement with this board of directors against chemical pesticides, is it not true that that would bleed over into your judgment?
No, in my opinion, science is science.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, just again, 1 minute. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Hastings, do you have redirect?
No, Your Honor, I do not.
Okay, great. Then Dr. Kwan, you're excused, and just give us another moment, plaintiff, before the next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, plaintiff, whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff would like to call Samantha Arnold to the stand. May I proceed?
Go ahead.
Miss Arnold, can you please state your name for the court?
Samantha Arnold, but most people call me Sam.
And Sam, why are you here today?
I was the caterer for the wedding of Genesis and Casey.
And how did you get into catering?
Great question. Well, it was the monthly meeting for my stepmom's book club. Poor girl was only 23 and she couldn't figure out how to use the stove. I always loved to watch our home chef cook, and I just had such a natural talent for it. I single-handedly saved book club that day, and I've just been into it ever since.
So, Miss Arnold, what do you do for a living now?
I am what they call a world-renowned chef. I own my very own catering company where I serve as the executive chef, naturally. I also previously worked for Harper at Peony.
And what kind of experience do you have in this field?
Well, the absolute best experience, of course. Perry was such a great place to learn. My work was the literal best work that daddy's money could buy. I've been acclaimed by critics everywhere. They gave my food like 6 out of 5 stars. This is my passion, and I couldn't picture myself doing anything else, besides like being an heiress back in Paris.
Now, Miss Arnold, how did you first come into contact with Harper Martini and Peony Estates?
Well, I originally met Harper at 2016 at his 1 year anniversary of Peony, and I was catering, and he like totally fell in love with my food. That night was amazing. My business exploded, and it's just been going so good.
How did you come to know Genesis and Casey?
Harper did himself the great favor of asking me to cater for Genesis and Casey's dress rehearsal and their wedding. It was a great opportunity to exploit the potential of my business. Weddings are like the pinnacle of catering opportunities, and the smart businesswoman in me just could have never passed up this opportunity.
And how involved was Harper in the wedding process?
From my experience, he was a total dadzilla. He was super completely involved in every single detail of the wedding, especially when it came to Genesis.
And how was Harper involved when it came to Genesis?
All they did was fight and fight over Casey and over every little thing about the wedding. From what I heard, it sounded like they hated each other. Harper was just at his boiling point with him. I could always feel their tension.
Were there any conversations between Harper and Harper about Genesis with you that you found odd?
Well, there were many instances, but there was one thing that stood out to me because I had to deal with the catering.
And what was that, Miss Arnold?
It was Harper. He gave me this bottle of wine called Cara that was specifically reserved for Genesis. He said that he was giving Genesis something special, something that would take care of his problems forever.
And was that the last time Harper talked to you about Genesis?
No, there was another time. I saw a bottle of bog-off spray in the kitchen, and I was so annoyed to ask why I was in my kitchen space. So I asked him why I was there.
And what did he tell you?
Well, he said it was to kill pests like Genesis. He then went on to say that he was kidding, of course, but I don't know. After hearing about his plan to have something special for Genesis, I don't know. It just made me feel really uneasy.
And the night of the rehearsal dinner, did you end up giving Genesis that special bottle of wine?
Yeah, I did. Now looking back, I think I shouldn't have, but Harper helped me with my start. Daddy always told me not to bite the hand that feeds you.
What do you mean by that?
Harper. He was the reason my business blew up. But I already felt uneasy about the wine based off of what he said before. But then he gave the bottle of wine to me to give to Genesis and told me to make sure Genesis was even alone when he drank it. I just wanted to chalk it up to like not wanting to share a good bottle of wine, but I don't think I'm so sure anymore.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Hello, Miss Arnold. Just a few questions. So, is it true that Harper had been nothing short of friendly to you during the course of your business relationship?
Yeah, as a total business professional, he was like tip top shape.
And you were thrilled to cater the Soto Petrillo wedding, correct?
I mean, of course, like I said, it was such a good reason to exploit myself.
Mhm. And on the night of the reception, you cannot recall or take note of what anybody was drinking that night other than the champagne you served, correct?
No, besides the bottle that was like given specifically for Genesis, no, I wasn't really looking.
But did you witness Genesis drink the wine?
No, I just saw the whole big spiel of the giving to him. Sorry, my bad.
You're good. And you never witnessed Harper commit any forms of physical violence, have you?
Oh God, no. Why? Oh no.
And did you see Harper pour the pesticides into the bottle of Carol wine?
No, I didn't see Harper pour pesticides into wine.
No more questions, Your Honor.
Sorry, any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just like to ask that my witness be allowed to step down.
Okay. And anything further from the plaintiff at this time?
Yes, Your Honor, we would ask permission to read stipulation 9 onto the record.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Stipulation 9 reads, all leftover food and beverages, alcoholic and otherwise, from the June 7th, 2019 rehearsal dinner were tested, and those tests found no organophosphate or other poisons or abnormalities. With that, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests his case in chief.
And would the parties like to take a brief recess before moving on, or are we good to go?
Would we be able to take a 5-minute break?
That's fine with me. So like 2 or 3:05.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, are you guys back? I can't tell, sorry. Okay, perfect. So defense, you can go ahead with your first witness whenever you're ready.
All right. The defense would like to first call Mrs. Blair Osborne to the stand.
Go ahead.
All right. Please state your name for the court.
Hi, my name is Blair Osborne.
And what is your occupation?
I work as a private event planner in Rapid River Valley, Midlands. I'm also the CEO, CFO, and all other relevant executive roles that fall under my position as the founder and owner of Bliss by Blair Events.
What is your experience in this field?
Well, I have decades of success arranging intimate events for my family and friends, and I just had so much fun with that. So I decided to found my business in 2011, and since then have hosted many, many events, different private events, 83 of which have been at Peony Estates.
And how are you affiliated with Peony Estates?
Well, I first became affiliated with Peony Estates in the spring of 2015. I had these two events that overlapped. It was such a disaster, but Harper Martini came to my rescue. He totally saved me and let me use Peony Estates as the venue for my event that day.
Can you explain your business relationship?
I've built a very good rapport with all the employees at Peony Estates. Needless to say, I was so happy when Harper asked me to plan the wedding for Casey Soto and Genesis. It felt like planning a wedding for family.
What happened when you started to plan this wedding?
Well, like with all wedding planning, there was a lot of confusion and definitely some miscommunication. Honestly, with this wedding, it was very chaotic, and there were times when I felt out of control, but I did my best to stay professional. Harper and Genesis definitely had a hard time getting along, and Harper was very stressed out about it, poor man. He seemed like he had a lot on his plate, but he just wanted to do what was best for Casey. He wanted to give.
Objection, Your Honor, as to speculating to the state of mind of Harper that he always wanted to do what was right and best by Casey.
Response from Ms. Sager.
Yes, Your Honor, this is the rationally based perception of this witness as to the relationship between Harper Martini and Genesis Petrillo and Casey Soto, excuse me. It is not speculating to the mindset, it's the rationally based perception.
May I respond, Your Honor? While there has been foundation laid that they have had a business relationship and that she has planned events for Peony Estates, there's been no foundation laid to how she would know the state of mind of Harper or the intent of Harper or the hopes and desires of Harper in relation to her child.
I agree. I'm going to sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Osborne, moving on. What happened after that?
Well, Genesis and Harper were clearly having issues, but Harper tried his best to make amends.
To lack of personal knowledge that Genesis and Harper were clearly having personal issues, there's been no foundation laid as to how Blair would know that they were having personal issues.
Ms. Sager.
Again, Your Honor, this is the rationally based perception of this witness. It's been clear as well from other testimonies that that Harper Martini and Genesis Petrillo were having other issues, were having tension. So it was reasonable that this witness, however removed she may be from the relationship, it's reasonable that she would be able to perceive this tension.
What exactly, Ms. Sager, do you think is the foundation from this witness alone that she would be able to know that there was personal issues?
Yes, Your Honor, just specifically the fact that she had been working in close relationship with Harper Martini, planning the wedding for his child, and that Blair had been meeting with the couple as well as with Harper Martini.
Ms. Hastings.
While there has been a foundation laid that Blair has been working with them, it is not within her rationally based perception, as they have not stated any instances in which she has observed a specific occurrence between these two parties, and so she wouldn't know how the nature of their relationship, the way it's characterized in her testimony.
So I'm going to sustain the objection for now, but Ms. Sager, if you can get into more of that foundation, like specific instances or things that Ms. Osborne actually saw, then I'm sure she'll be able to testify later to kind of the character of their relationship.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor. Moving on, Mrs. Osborne. Later that night, who did you see drinking with Genesis at the bar?
I saw Genesis drinking with Angel Rodriguez and Drew Matkus.
Okay, and did Drew Matsukas seem to have been drinking?
No, he seemed sober from what I could tell.
Objection, Your Honor. As to lack of personal knowledge, there's been no foundation laid to how Miss Osborne would know if Drew was sober or not.
Ms. Sager?
Yes, respectfully, Your Honor, a bystander observing the situation would be able to tell from a reasonable degree of certainty whether or not a person was under the influence of alcohol to a degree that would lead them to be not sober.
So I agree. I'm going to overrule just because Miss Osborne is still testifying to what she witnessed herself. But if it goes beyond that, Miss Hastings, please re-raise your objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Osborne, how did Genesis and Angel appear to be during this instance?
They appeared to be drunk.
Okay. And did anything else significant happen the night before the party ended?
Well, when I saw Genesis, I made sure to tell her to drink plenty of water. I could tell she drank enough to be hungover the next day, but as a wedding
At this
planner,
point, I would re-raise my objection
To
to the statement that I could tell Genesis was drunk. There's been no foundation laid of what Miss Osborne personally observed, the physical attributes or behavior of Genesis that would lead her to rationally perceive that she was drunk.
Miss Sager?
Yes, Your Honor, respectfully, again, Blair Osborne is a wedding planner. She works around brides and grooms and members of wedding parties who like to drink a lot to celebrate their weddings coming up the next day. And so in addition to that, she would be able to reasonably understand the nature of someone's level of intoxication. Specifically in the case of Genesis, she had worked closely with Genesis and can understand when Genesis is acting out of character.
So I'm going to sustain the objection to the extent that I don't think there has been enough testimony to show that Miss Osborne actually knew that Genesis was drunk. So if you can get her to talk about what exactly Genesis was doing that led her to that conclusion, that would satisfy the court's problem at this time.
All right. I'll ask you that question, Miss Osborne. Was there anything that you observed Genesis Petrillo to be doing that was acting out of character of her?
no, I did not.
Okay, moving on. What was your interaction with Harper like the next day?
Well, Harper was so sweet. He was very excited about the wedding and he wanted everything to go perfectly for Casey. I gave him a hug and assured him that
Objection, Your Honor. As to speculation, there's been no foundation laid as to how Miss Osborne would know that Harper wanted everything to go perfectly in the wedding.
Ms. Sager?
Respectfully, Your Honor, Blair Osborne had been working closely with Harper Martini, had built a relationship, a business relationship, possibly a personal relationship with him, and this foundation has already been laid, Your Honor.
Ms. Hastings, last word.
Despite the fact that they had a business relationship, Miss Osborne does not have the knowledge to testify to a specific state of mind that Harper had on that morning of June 9th.
I'm going to overrule just because she's the wedding planner. And presumably Harper wanted things to go a certain way.
Mm-hmm. All right. One final question, Miss Osborne. Did you ever see Mr. Martini put pesticides into the bottle of wine he gave to Genesis?
No, I did not. I didn't see the bottle of wine before it was presented to Genesis, and I never saw it up close. I was busy with other issues at the wedding and reception rehearsal.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Hastings Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Miss Osborne. So as we heard, excuse me, sorry. As we heard earlier, you know Harper Martini, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And you would say that you know him well?
Yes.
And you met him because you were desperate for an alternative venue for one of your events?
I was, yes. He really came to the rescue.
And you were the wedding planner for Harper's child, Casey Soto?
I was, yes.
And you're so close to their family that you said planning their wedding felt like planning for family to you. Is that right?
I did, yes.
But this wedding would turn out to be, in your words, the worst professional experience of your life. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And it's true that you no longer work with Peony Estates. Is that right?
Objection. Pursuant to Rules 407, this is subsequent remedial measures.
Ms. Hastings, response?
Your Honor, may I ask to what specifically opposing counsel is referring to being subsequent remedial measures?
Sure. Ms. Sager, do you want to elaborate on your 407 objection?
Yes. So subsequent remedial measures, the objection in this case is based upon the fact, leading the witness to testify about the fact that she no longer held weddings at Peony Estates following the incident with Mrs. Petrillo. And that would be impermissible under this Rule 407 subsequent remedial measures because it leads to it might cause the jury to it might be more, in addition, it might be more prejudicial than probative. I'm so sorry.
Okay, Ms. Hastings for the 407 first.
Yes. Your Honor, based on my understanding and interpretation of 407, it is not admissible to prove negligence, culpable conduct, a defect in a product or design, or a need for warning or instruction. And none of these specific elements are what we are using this testimony to show. We're just showing the nature of the relationship between Miss Osborne and Peony Estates and just pointing out that she no longer works with them. We're not using this to prove negligence or culpable conduct, and we're not pursuing negligence in today's case.
Ms. Sager?
I would argue that it is offered to prove culpable conduct, to place the blame on the defendant in this case, because if the witness is led down that path and it's brought up that she left Peony Estates, it could possibly lead the jury to go down the route that she left because of some sort of culpable conduct.
Okay, I'm gonna overrule the objection, but Ms. Sager, I will offer a limiting instruction to the jury that this evidence can't be used for culpable conduct and can only go to what Ms. Hastings said the evidence would be argued to show.
Yes,
Go
Your
ahead.
Honor. Now, Miss Osborne, I want to move on to your planning of the wedding. When Harper first contacted you about this wedding, Casey and Genesis were not aware that you had been hired, right?
No, they were not.
And they were not aware that their own wedding was to be held at Peony Estates the following June. Is that right?
That is correct.
In fact, Harper paid you a 15% higher rate in order to stay discreet on these matters. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. He was so generous.
Now, I want to talk about a particular meeting that happened, and it happened after an event at Black Bear Casino. Do you remember this meeting?
I do, yes.
And do you remember being played a voicemail?
Yes, I do remember that.
Excuse me, I'm going to shift my focus. I want to now talk about the rehearsal dinner. By the date of the rehearsal, you thought it was clear that things between Harper and Genesis had reached a boiling point.
Yes, the tensions were so high, but that's normal for right before the wedding.
But in your words, it was a boiling point. Is that right?
Yes.
And Harper and Genesis got into a disagreement this afternoon. Is that right?
They did.
And they appeared to be avoiding each other intentionally for the rest of the day.
Yes, they were.
And when it came to the toast, they were insulting each other once again.
Yes.
And based on what they said to each other, it seemed clear to you that they were antagonizing each other.
Yes, they were.
And when Harper gave Genesis the wine bottle, he said not to open it in front of other people. Is that right?
Yes, it was a very sweet gesture giving Genesis the Taro bottle of wine.
But he said that he wanted it to be a private moment to reflect on everything that he has done. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. It really seemed like a peace offering for Genesis.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, then Ms. Osborne can be excused, and defense, you can set up for your next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense calls Dr. Cannon to the stand.
Okay.
Permission to proceed, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Thank you. All right, good morning, Dr. Cannon. I just have a few questions for you today.
Okay.
Will you please state your name for the court?
Yes, my name is Dr. Raquel Cannon.
And Dr. Cannon, what is your occupation?
I am a medical doctor with an emphasis in both toxicology and pharmacology. Currently, I work as a consulting for Gardner Consulting in California.
And can you explain why you're here today?
I am here today because Harper Martini's attorneys hired me to assess the findings of Dr. Kwan with regards to the death of Genesis Petrillo.
And before we speak about your investigation, will you explain what your education is?
Yes, ma'am. I received a Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from Ohio State University. I then went on to receive an MD from Harvard Medical School.
And can you explain your licensing and publication?
Yes, I am currently licensed to practice medicine in California, Midlands, Illinois, Wyoming, and Florida.
Have you testified in court before, Dr. Cannon?
Yes, I have testified in over 35 legal cases, 30 of them being civil matters.
And what methods do you commonly use in your field?
As a consultant, I review various documents involved in a case and draw conclusions from them.
Are these reliable and common practices in your field?
Yes, they are the practices used by all of the consultants at my firm, as well as various other firms throughout the country.
And are these the methods that you used when investigating the death of Genesis Petrillo?
They are.
Now, to go a little bit into your investigation, will you explain how you went about investigating this case?
For this case in particular, I reviewed the affidavit of Angel Rodriguez, the reports of Dr. Kwan, as well as exhibits 5, 6, 7, 10, and 23.
Did you run any tests or examine the body of Mr. Petrillo?
No, I did not. The body was cremated before I could examine it, and no tests were run, but that is okay, as that has commonly happened during many of my investigations.
And were any other tests run as well on the body or anything that you knew of prior to you examining the case?
There may have been tests run by Dr. Kwan.
What did you conclude?
I concluded that there were many other options.
Sorry, we have an objection here. Go ahead.
Oh, I apologize, Your Honor. I wasn't able to hear.
Nope, that's okay. Go ahead, Mr. Millett.
Your Honor, under Rule 702B specifically, in order for an expert to draw conclusions about a case, or more specifically the cause of Genesis Petrillo's death, that expert witness has to draw upon the facts and data of the case in a sufficient manner. And as seeing as the witness has just testified that she has neither spoken to any of the people whose affidavit she reviewed, nor has she run any tests or actually been with the body of Genesis Petrillo, it would be highly unlikely that she has sufficient facts and data in order to be qualified under 702 to make expert conclusions. And as such, her testimony in those conclusions would be inadmissible.
Ms. Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 702, it stipulates that there must be specific testimony based on sufficient facts and data. Dr. Cannon has testified to her methods and the fact that they are peer-reviewed and reliable, and has explained that these methods were used in this case, and that she did not act out of character or out of these methods when investigating this case, which gives her grounds to speak on her conclusions and satisfies all 4 prongs of Rule 702, which is testimony by expert witnesses.
So, Ms. Robertson, Mr. Marlette seems to have a particular problem with 702B, which is the facts and data that she relied on. So can you go to the point of, she didn't see the body, she didn't talk to anyone. Why should we still let her testify?
Well, Your Honor, specifically, Dr. Cannon specifically testified that she used the reliable means as a consultant, including the exhibits and the tests that were run by Dr. Kwan and the report of Dr. Kwan, which is the reliable method that she would normally use in this case as a consultant, which she has already testified to.
Response.
Your Honor, as you stated, my argument is not with her use of the method she used, but rather the fact that she hasn't run any tests. She hasn't gotten any firsthand knowledge of the facts of which she's reviewing. Therefore, it's inadmissible for her to draw conclusions about the cause of death of Genesis Petrillo. If she wishes to draw conclusions about the testimony of Dr. Kwan or the other affidavit she read, that is more than in her ability to do so. But as for her conclusions of Genesis Petrillo's death, it would be inadmissible.
Your Honor, permission to respond? Thank you. Your Honor, that is precisely what Dr. Cannon is going to be doing today. She will be drawing conclusions based on Dr. Kwan's testimony, which was heard by the plaintiff. If the plaintiff wants to strike their own witness's testimony from the record based on being unreliable, they're more than happy to do that on their own time. However, since my witness will be testifying to that, there should not be a problem based on Rule 702.
Okay, Mr. Marlette, your point's well taken, but I'm gonna overrule the objection because I think it goes more to weight than admissibility. Feel free to cross on it later, though.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, Dr. Cannon, will you please explain your conclusions?
Yes, to my understanding, before I became involved in this case, the general public was convinced that Genesis Petrillo drank a bottle of wine that was laced with organophosphate pesticide and that thus killed her. I disagree with this assessment. There were many other options that just cannot be ruled out at this time.
And can you explain what your conclusions were?
Yes, my first conclusion was that there was a possibility that Genesis Petrillo could have died of alcohol poisoning due to fatal respiratory arrest. She had many of the symptoms of alcohol poisoning when she was admitted to the hospital, and her blood alcohol content was 0.16. That was just the level she reached when she was tested. However, this was hours after what would have been her peak BAC.
So was it possible that her blood alcohol concentration was at a deadlier or at a deadly percentage prior to your investigation or prior to her blood being drawn?
It is quite possible that her BAC would have reached 0.3 or higher, which is the mark where it reaches deadly, at some point throughout the night before the test would have been taken.
And what is the second possible conclusion that you reached, Dr. Cannon?
My second possible conclusion was that she suffered from an allergic reaction. I understand, based on Angel Rodriguez's affidavit, that there was a buffet with many different types of food. It is entirely possible that she was allergic to one of those forms of food.
And were there any other possibilities, Dr. Cannon?
Yes, I also found it quite possible that she may have suffered from hepatic disease. This was not in her medical history. However, she was not consistently tested throughout the past few years, so it is possible that she had the disease before. It is also possible that she could have ingested the pesticides in a way other than the wine.
And based on your findings, is it possible that something other than the organophosphate poisoning caused Ms. Petrillo's death?
At this time, I just cannot conclusively rule out that there was something else that may have caused her death.
And were these conclusions that you drew ever ruled out by Dr. Kwan?
I do not believe they were.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Just give me 1 second. Okay, whenever you're ready for cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Cannon, you have testified in 35 cases in your career, isn't that correct?
That is correct.
And of all those cases, you have only testified for the defense?
Yes, I have.
And Dr. Cannon, you're a consultant for Gardner Consulting, yes?
I am.
And Desky Roach and Rodent Killer is one of your biggest clients.
Yes, that is true.
And the CEO of Desky approached you, correct?
Yes.
And he told you that if your company plans on keeping their business...
Objection, hearsay.
Response.
Your Honor, under Rule 8033, this is a plan of action. More specifically, this is a plan made by the CEO of Detsky Consulting, which falls under the then existing mental, emotional, or physical condition exception that rules this is admissible.
Can you just proffer the whole statement for the court so I can understand what's going on?
If I may proffer, he says, I ask if the CEO of Detsky, the corporation, says that if Gardner Consulting plans to keep their business, that the pesticides cannot be found to be the cause of Genesis Petrillo's death.
Okay. Ms. Robertson, response to 8033.
I do have a response to that. That would be a then existing mental, emotional, or physical condition. There doesn't appear to be a condition present. In addition to this, I would also raise an objection for more prejudicial than probative, given the fact that the company that Dr. Cannon works for has nothing to do with Bug Off, which is the only pesticide that was used at Peony Estates.
Response.
Your Honor, obviously, this being a plan, it falls as the exception to hearsay, but towards the 403 objection, the 403 states that the testimony elicited has to be substantially more prejudicial than probative, and given the nature of the Detsky Corporation and the significance that that corporation has to the company which Dr. Cannon works for, this evidence is probative enough, given the pesticide nature of the poisoning in this case, that it should be admissible.
Okay. Besides 8033, do you have another argument for this statement not being hearsay or being an exception to hearsay?
Me, Your Honor?
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Marlette.
Other than it being a then existing state of mind as a plan, no, I do not.
Okay, I'm going to sustain the objection then.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Cannon, you have never published on the topics of organophosphate poisoning.
No, I do not believe I have.
And to be clear, you're being paid $50,000 for your appearance here?
Yes, that is the standard amount I request for my duties.
So that's a yes to my question.
That's a yes to your question.
And Dr. Cannon, you did not speak with anybody involved in this case today. Isn't that true?
No, I did not.
And you didn't speak to any of the people whose affidavits you reviewed?
I did not.
Objection asked and answered.
Overruled.
And Dr. Cannon, you didn't have access to Genesis's body.
No, that has already been stated. I did not have access to her body, but that is perfectly okay, as that is a commonality in many of my cases.
And given that you didn't run any tests on Genesis.
Was there a question there?
You did not run any tests on Genesis's body, correct?
No, I did not run any tests, but again, this is a common practice in many of my cases.
So that's a yes to my question.
That is a yes to your question.
And you stated that a BAC of 0.16 is extremely unlikely to cause death, correct?
That is true. Usually it must reach the threshold of 0.3 in order to be deadly. However, as I have stated earlier, that was 2 hours after what may have been her peak BAC.
And a BAC of 0.3 is or higher is the lowest end in order for there to be alcohol poisoning.
That is true.
Which is almost double the 0.16 found to be in Genesis's body.
Yes, sir.
And you also stated that Genesis did not show any signs of allergic reaction.
She did not have a rash, as is typical with an allergic reaction. You are correct.
And as you stated, if there were allergic reaction, there would have been a rash or some inflammation.
Yes.
And she had neither of these very common signs of allergic reaction?
Not according to Dr. Kwan's report.
And Dr. Cannon, you also concluded that Genesis had no signs of hepatic disease?
Yes, it is not in her chart that she has hepatic disease, but as I said earlier, it is quite possible due to the fact that she has not been tested within the last couple of years.
And even if she did have hepatic disease, you stated that organophosphate poisoning would still be partially responsible for Genesis's death, correct?
Yes, it would have had to have exacerbated the symptoms of hepatic disease.
And if Genesis had ingested the poison directly, there would have been an esophageal burn, correct?
Correct.
Which you did not find.
No, that was not in Dr. Kwan's report.
And Dr. Cannon, the Cara wine produced by Harper Martini tested positive for pesticides, correct?
Yes, it did.
And no other food or drink found at the venue tested positive?
You are correct.
And Doctor, finally, you concluded that the most likely cause of Genesis's death was from organophosphate poisoning from the Cara wine that was produced by Harper Martini.
I did conclude that that was the most plausible, but just because it's the most plausible does not mean that it's actually what occurred.
But that's a yes to my question. You did conclude that that was the most likely cause of her death, of his death, excuse me.
I did, sir.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor. I ask that my witness be allowed to step down.
Okay, Dr. Cannon, you're excused. And defense, go ahead and set up for your final witness.
Defense calls Harper Martini to the stand.
Whenever you're ready.
Hi, Harper. May you please state your name for the court?
My name's Harper Martini.
Mr. Martini, I think you are muted.
Can you hear me? Hello,
I
can you hear
apologize
me?
for the technical difficulties, Your Honor.
That's okay. I can hear him. Can you not?
I can't as well, Your Honor.
Okay, sorry. That was actually my fault. May you please state your name for the court?
My name's Harper Martini.
And what is your occupation?
I'm the owner and operator of Peony Estates.
And what is your relationship to Casey Soto?
I'm his only father. You know, his mother died when we just got married, so I'm his father. Raised him up my own.
So you did raise him alone.
Yes, I did, ma'am.
Okay. So tell me about your first interaction with his late fiance, Genesis Petrillo.
Me and Genesis, we didn't always get along. You see, well, our first interaction was not that good. You know, she came to my winery for her first time, and she just began insulting it. The first thing Genesis said to me was that Rapid River Valley wasn't hip enough for this artsy-fartsy Peony Estates, and that the tasting room looked like a Steve Jobs wannabe at Leonard and Midland. You know, I wanted to like them, I really did, and she was my Casey's choice, but I didn't like the influence she had on her. I didn't like the influence she had on me. It caused some anger. I'm like, no.
Mm-hmm. Now, how did Genesis influence Casey?
As Casey would put it, Genesis brought out that fun side. So much fun that they pressured Casey into drinking a glass of every wine in my cellar in one night. Next thing I knew, my baby girl was on a hospital bed suffering from alcohol poisoning. Casey couldn't say no to Genesis and would do anything she asked of him. I didn't like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, tell me what you witnessed 4 months prior to the wedding.
I saw Genesis kissing Casey's best friend, Drew.
What was Genesis' reaction to you witnessing this?
Well, she freaked out. She told me not to tell Casey, promised it wouldn't happen again, and she said it was only a kiss. But I knew it was more.
Mm-hmm. Why didn't you tell Casey?
Well, Casey got mad at me because me and Genesis always didn't get along together, and they were getting married, and he said, just try to bury the hatchet, try to keep it cool. And I was like, all right, Casey, anything for you. I always loved him. And, so I just didn't tell him. I figured he wouldn't even believe me. It wouldn't matter, and it just worsened our relationship.
Mm-hmm. Okay, switching gears a little bit, but so mid-2018, you began crafting a formula of wine now referred to as Cara wine.
That is correct.
And what motivated you to create this wine?
Well, you see, Genesis, she called my wine cheap. I didn't like that. Did not like that at all. So what did I do? I tried to make a wine that was better. Trying to make one that she would like, that would blow off the charts.
Mm-hmm. And any other reasons?
Casey wanted me and Genesis to bury the hatchet and move on, but it was difficult, Genesis being who they are, always talking bad, always acting snotty, and doing their best to cause me to fail. I just decided to try and make peace. I gave Cara as a gift to Genesis. Cara was the exact complex wine that Genesis was falling over, when they were tasting with a Sam.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, the night of the wedding, did you intentionally put pesticides into the bottle of the Cara wine?
Absolutely not. I would never do that to my Casey or his girl ever.
Mm-hmm. And did you ever have intention of harming Genesis?
No, never. I never wanted to harm her.
Mm-hmm. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, Cross, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Martini.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Martini, I'd like to begin by talking about your daughter, Casey Soto. And you stated earlier that she was the light of your life, correct?
That is correct. I do love my Casey very much.
The perfect daughter.
Yes, of course.
But her only flaw was her partner, Genesis Petrillo, right?
She had an interesting taste. I didn't like the girl she was with. So yeah, I guess you could see that was a flaw in her taste.
And you were scared that Genesis was going to take away your son, Casey Soto, as they were moving to Paris together, correct?
Yep, I don't like France myself, and that's my only daughter. I want her close to me. I want her to be with me. So I didn't really like that some other girl was trying to take it away. And I didn't sit well.
You thought you were going to lose your girl, right?
That is very correct.
But you tried to bury the hatchet, right?
I did. I did try to bury the hatchet.
And this started with a lunch date with Genesis, right?
Correct, ma'am.
And this lunch date left you very upset as you found out about their intention to move to Paris.
I was indeed very upset. And then, I wanted this lunch date to be something very civil, calm, just move on, bury the hatchet, and here she is, and she goes and dropped this. I mean, I was very upset about it.
You were so upset that you wrote a note afterwards, right?
Yeah, that is correct.
Mr. Martini, would you recognize this note if it were shown to you today?
I would.
Your Honor, assuming we are outside the presence of the jury, Ms. Hastings, could you please screen share Exhibit 24? Mr. Martini, do you recognize what is on the screen right now?
I do.
Is this a fair and accurate copy?
Yeah, I thought I got rid of that, but yeah.
Mr. Martini, are those your initials at the bottom of the note?
That they are.
Permission to publish this to the jury?
Any objection, Ms. Cooper?
No objections right now, Your Honor.
Your Honor.
Well, hold on, I'm sorry, Ms. Christer, are you gonna enter this into evidence or just show it?
Yes.
Okay, so Ms. Cooper, any objection to it being admitted into evidence?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, it's admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Martini, follow along as I read aloud. It has come to this. The wedding can't happen. I need you out of our lives. Leave Casey, and the enclosed $300,000 is yours. Otherwise, I will take you out of the picture the hard way. Don't make it come to that. You have till the 7th. Choose wisely. Mr. Martini, the 7th was in fact the day of the wedding, correct?
That is correct.
And the day that Genesis died of poisoning, pesticide poisoning.
Correct.
Mr. Martini, in your deposition, you said that you wish Casey and Genesis never met, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Martini, in your deposition, you did not mention that Drew Mitsoukas had kissed Genesis at all, did you?
I did not mention that in my deposition, no.
Mr. Martini, you didn't think this was relevant to mention into your deposition?
I didn't think it was that relevant, no.
Mr. Martini, and you've been privy to all of the testimonies made today, correct?
Correct.
And you heard Angel Rodriguez classify Genesis and Casey's relationship as one of true love, right?
That is correct. I did hear that.
They were planning to move to Paris together, after all, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Martini, you thought that Genesis was too critical of how you ran Peony Estates, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
This was your life's long work, after all.
Yeah, she was criticizing it all the time. I didn't like that.
Mr. Martini, at the rehearsal dinner, you called Genesis a problem child in front of the entire wedding party, right?
That is correct, I did.
And Mr. Martini, you said you might have slapped Genesis if Casey was not there.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it was just a little initial anger right there. Something that
Now, Mr. Martini, I would like to move on to the events of June 7th, 2019 specifically. You said that the wedding was going phenomenally at first, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You even tried to patch things up by giving Genesis a bottle of the Cara wine.
I did. I hope that would have been a good peace offering to her.
Mr. Martini, you stored that bottle of Cara wine in the kitchen, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Where you were seen taking an open can of pesticides too, right?
There's bugs in the cellar. I had to.
And Mr. Martini, you were here when Angel Rodriguez stated that you called Genesis a pest as you were doing this, and you said that pesticides can kill pests, right?
That, yeah, that was a good joke, yes.
Mr. Martini, you are aware that Genesis was killed by the exact same pesticides that you use at Peony Estates.
Yes, I am aware, sadly. I am aware.
And Mr. Martini, you had seen before that pesticides could be fatal to a person when your employee, Kirby Doolittle, drank a wine glass with pesticides, right?
Yes, I knew the effects they had.
Additionally, Mr. Martini, you requested that Genesis be the only one to drink the wine and that he should drink it alone, correct?
Yeah, it's a peace offering judgment for her. I didn't want nobody else to have it but them.
Now, I would like to direct your attention to 9 in the morning of the next day. You told Mr. Rodriguez, Genesis got poisoned? We'll have to cancel the wedding. Go tell Casey. Casey needs to know.
Yes, I did say that.
But nobody had told you prior to that Genesis had gotten poisoned.
Well, you see, Austin had called me that he was in the hospital, so I figured something must have happened. That must be a poisoning of some sorts. I figured it was just alcohol poisoning that my Casey had been through.
Mr. Martini, just to clarify, Mr. Lewis never told you who had been sent to the hospital that morning, had they?
Figured it might be something important.
Yes, but you were not aware that Genesis Petrillo was the one that was sent to the hospital, correct?
Come on. When I wake up, I know who's there and who's not.
Mr. Martini, you didn't go to the hospital with Casey, did you?
I did not. No, I didn't see no reason for me to go.
You weren't there to support your daughter the day that her fiance died?
I'd support her otherwise.
Objection, relevance.
Ms. Cooper, will you explain?
Yes, whether or not Harper had gone to the hospital with Casey is not relevant to whether or not he had put pesticides into a bottle of wine.
Response.
Your Honor, relevance is a very low bar, and I'm simply asking Mr. Martini where he was at a specific time on a specific day.
Response.
Yes, Your Honor. In addition, this has also already been asked and answered, and it has been made clear that Mr. Martini did not go to the hospital with Casey.
Your Honor, if I may, that was the first time I asked that question.
I agree, overruled.
Moving on, Mr. Martini, you even said that you were relieved when you found out that Genesis had died, correct?
My Casey was a free lady, so yeah, I would say that. I mean, wasn't relieved that she died. That's a terrible thing that happened. I was very, distraught. I lost a whole bunch of wine that day too, and it was very rough for me. But I was relieved for Casey. But didn't like the influence she had on Casey, so relieved for her.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. One quick redirect.
Go ahead.
Mr. Martini, can you go into explain further into why you did not mention the relationship between Drew and Genesis in the affidavit?
Yeah, I didn't want to hurt my Casey. It would hurt her to hear that about her, now dead fiance, and I just didn't want that to hear about that. It would be terrible, and they never asked me about it. So I figured if y'all gonna ask me directly, and I don't want to hurt my Casey, what's the point of mentioning? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, and going back to the napkin, what exactly was the hard way that you were talking about with Genesis?
I would have just told Casey what Genesis had done. I would have told Casey that Genesis was an unfair cheating. That would have been the hard way of Casey knowing the truth.
Okay. And one last question. Did you pour the pesticide into the wine with the intent to harm Genesis?
No, absolutely not.
No more questions, Your Honor.
Any recross on those points?
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay, then Mr. Martini, you can be excused. Does the defense have anything further?
The defense rests its case. Thank you.
Okay, and are we ready to move to closings?
Yes.
Plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. We would just like to request a 5-minute break between now and closings.
Okay, yep, that's fine. So 3:58.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, may I inquire what time all last is?
4:46.
Okay, so we're good.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay, are both parties ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense?
Yes, Your Honor, we're ready to proceed.
Okay, great. So plaintiff closing whenever you're ready.
May I proceed?
Yep.
Harper was at his boiling point. Ladies and gentlemen, as you have heard in today's trial, this father loved his son so much that he was willing to do anything not to have to let him go. Time and time again, Harper showed how far he was willing to go to keep Genesis out of Casey's life. On the napkin that Harper stated, "I had thought I'd thrown away," he said to Genesis, "I will take you out of the picture the hard way, and you have till June 7th. And ladies and gentlemen, it all came to a head on June 7th when Harper reached his boiling point. June 8th should have been the best day of Genesis's life. Instead, she never made it down the aisle. She never even took another breath. That is why we, the plaintiff, have filed a claim against Harper for battery. That means that we had the burden of proof today. And the judge will tell you, members of the jury, that to meet that burden today, we have to meet that burden by the preponderance of the evidence. Or in other words, more likely than not. We had to prove three things today. First, Harper Martini intentionally mixed pesticides into the wine. Second, when Harper put those pesticides into the wine, it was his intent to cause harm. And third, when Genesis drank that wine, she died as a result of the pesticides. And ladies and gentlemen, we have met the burden here today. We have shown you that Harper reached his boiling point, poisoned Genesis, and Genesis died as a result. First, we heard the testimony of Angel Rodriguez, who told you exactly what happened on the night of June 7th and 8th. You heard how Harper hated Genesis and how he had reached his boiling point. Harper fought with Genesis while planning the wedding, during the rehearsal dinner, and ladies and gentlemen, hours before Genesis took her last breath. You heard Harper threaten Genesis that night, saying, "I will make you disappear." And folks, look what happened. Harper made Genesis so scared that she told Angel, "I'm afraid Harper's going to kill me." Moreover, you heard how Genesis was the only person to drink from the poisoned bottle of Cara wine, except for Angel, who had one sip and spit it out immediately, saying that it didn't taste right. Angel also testified that although Genesis was drinking that night, her symptoms that had progressed throughout the night were not consistent with the amount of alcohol that she had consumed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, secondly, you heard the testimony of our expert witness, Dr. Kwan, a specialist in toxicology that was Genesis's doctor in the ER. He testified that the extreme and specific symptoms Genesis was having that night lined up with the symptoms expected from somebody who had been poisoned by an organophosphate, which was found in pesticides. Likewise, Dr. Kwan tested the blood, tested the wine, and found the exact same organophosphate. And ladies and gentlemen, he told you how Genesis died. She was poisoned by those pesticides. Finally, you heard the testimony of Harper's own employee and caterer for the wedding, Sam Arnold. She detailed how Harper was consistently fighting with Genesis and how Harper was clearly at his boiling point. Harper had a plan, as he stated, something that would take care of their problem forever. You heard Harper specifically reserve the deadly Cara wine for Genesis and Genesis only. Moreover, you learned that Sam saw a bottle of pesticides in the kitchen and asked Harper what it was for. When Harper didn't say that it was to take care of the insect infestation, rather she said it was to kill pests like Genesis. Casey was the light of Harper's life. Harper wasn't willing to or ready to let his son go. He fought with Genesis for years, and he was willing to do whatever it took to keep his son in his life, to keep his son in his control. On June 7th, Harper saw that Casey was slipping away and did the only thing he could think of to keep Casey around. He reached his boiling point. We have proven to you today that Harper intended to harm Genesis and did so on June 7th. Members of the jury, there is only one reasonable verdict that you can find. Find the defendant, Harper Martini, liable of battery. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense?
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, and may it please the court, a spotlight has been placed on the wrong suspect. Two sides of the story were presented today, one of an alleged offense by a father and one of an offense by a jealous lover. The truth of the matter here is that Harper withheld a secret from his daughter, Casey Soto, that Genesis Petrillo was having an affair with Drew Matsoukas. A secret withheld in an attempt to protect his daughter, a secret which would eventually lead to the loss of Mr. Genesis Petrillo. Good morning, Your Honors. My name is Lauren Sager, and I, along with my co-counsels, Julia Robertson and Aaron Cooper, represent the defendant, Mr. Harper Martini, in today's case. The plaintiff bears the burden of proof by which they need to prove by a preponderance of the evidence, or by more likely than not, that Mr. Harper Martini acted with intent to cause harmful or offensive contact to Mr. Genesis Petrillo, and that as a direct and proximate result of the foregoing, the plaintiff has suffered harm. The Supreme Court of Midlands stated in the case of Sridhar v. Gandham that a battery is an intentional tort and that non-consensual touching is all that is required. Additionally, the elements of civil battery, according to the case of Burdett v. Copenhaver, are 1, an act by a defendant, 2, an intent to cause harmful or offensive contact on the part of the defendant, and 3, harmful or offensive contact to the plaintiff. Pursuant to the case of Jacob v. Alexander, the touching that is necessary for a battery to occur does not require that the defendant's physical person make contact with the plaintiff's physical person. Therefore, Harper Martini's alleged act to introduce an injurious substance into Genesis Petrillo's wine would possibly be able to constitute this type of offensive touch. Finally, from the case of Nugent v. Peel, direct causation means that but for the defendant's actions, the plaintiff's harm would not have occurred. Proximate causation means that the plaintiff's harm was a reasonably foreseeable result of the defendant's actions. Your Honors, all of this case law shows exactly what the plaintiff would have needed to prove. And Your Honors, they have not met their burden in this case. They have failed to prove that it is by a direct and proximate result, meaning that but for the defendant's actions, the plaintiff's harm would not have occurred. They have not sufficiently ruled out all other possible alternatives. A spotlight has been placed on the wrong suspect, Your Honors. For the defense, we first called Ms. Blair Osborne, who testified to the love Harper Martini had for his daughter, Casey Soto. And secondly, she also testified to the fact that Drew Matsoukas had been in close proximity to Genesis Petrillo while Mr. Petrillo drank the wine. Next, we called Dr. Raquel Cannon, who testified and raised doubt on the plaintiff's only expert witness, Dr. Kwan, who gave a very biased testimony. Thirdly, we called Harper Martini, who told his side of the story, the truth, by which the hard way, as referenced by this napkin that was entered into evidence, the hard way was telling his daughter about her fiance's affair. Next, the plaintiff called 3 witnesses as well. However, not one of these witnesses has been able to testify to seeing Harper Martini pour pesticides into the Cara wine that Genesis would drink. They have not met their burden of proof. First, they called Angel Rodriguez, who told you that Drew was insisting that Genesis was just drunk and would be fine in the morning. Next, they called Dr. Jameen Kwan, who gave a very biased account. Biased because Dr. Kwan is personally against the use of chemical pesticides. He is actively pursuing legislation to ban the use of chemical pesticides and is therefore likely to twist Mr. Petrillo's death to support his own agenda. Thirdly, they called Sam Arnold, who never witnessed Harper commit any violent acts. Miss Arnold, in fact, scoffed at this idea. She never saw Harper pour pesticides into the bottle of Cara wine. Your Honors, the spotlight has been placed on the wrong suspect. Drew Matsukas is the suspect on whom the spotlight should have been placed. And in closing, the plaintiff has failed to prove the elements of their claim, and as such, we respectfully ask the jury to find Harper Martini not liable. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor, if I may proceed.
Go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard about Mr. Martini's anger, but you didn't hear about Drew at all. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard from not only Dr. Kwan, but from opposing counsel's expert witness as well, that the most likely cause of Genesis Petrillo's death was the organophosphate poisoning from the Cara wine that was produced by Mr. Martini. The defense made up a narrative today that Genesis had cheated, but as you know, you heard no evidence of this today. And as Harper Martini did not even state in his deposition that this had ever occurred. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you have to rule today based on a preponderance of evidence, what is most likely. So even if the scales are tipped in one part more than 50%, that's the side that you will rule on. And you have heard enough evidence today to know that the most likely thing that happened on June 7th and 8th was that Harper Martini, in order to keep Casey under his control, battered and ended the life of Genesis through that poison. Dutiful members of the jury, as such, we, the plaintiff today, ask you to find the defendant, Harper Martini, liable of battery. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That wraps up everything. So if you'll just give us just 1 second to finish our ballots, and my co-judge will let me know when she's done that. Oh, she already did. I'm going to do it right now. And then I'll just text the tournament people that we're done. Sorry, I can't find like the button. And then we can go into just a few comments. Okay, so if everyone wants to come on like gallery mode so we can see everyone, or not gallery mode, sorry, put on your cameras, and then I'll let my co-judge like introduce herself first and go through anything she wants to say, and then I'll do the same.
Hi, great job, everyone. Hello, I'm Sarah Ann. I'm a 2L at Wake Forest Law. I went to UNC Charlotte for undergrad, and I did mock trial all throughout undergrad, so I know what you guys are going through. It's kind of terrible sometimes, but you guys did a great job. I can't imagine doing it over Zoom, so props to you all for that. I would say just quick general feedback. So for defendants, I like that you had this like alternative motive. It was because of this jealous lover or whatever, but I would have liked if you developed it more. Like, it was good for you to point out, Mr. Bartlett, that like it wasn't necessarily developed that much in your closing, because I think like that's good. There were a lot of like, whatever the key facts were, I feel like plaintiffs, you guys did a great job of pointing that out, because there were a lot of things where I was like, oh my God, that's not good. Like, I didn't know that was the case. Like, and that's not always like defendant's fault. Like, sometimes it's just the way the case is written. And so I never ever judge based on the merits of whatever case it is, because it's always something ridiculous. And then I want, for defendants, like I want you all to read more your rules of evidence. Like I want you to do a deep dive into them because that's something I struggle with a lot. In undergrad, honestly, I don't even think I ever really got that much into them. Like I wasn't on like some superstar team, and so I was like, oh, who cares? Like I'm just kind of gonna fly by the seat of my pants, like see what happens. And then I got to like law school, and I'm real like learning evidence now, and I realized that it would have been a lot. Could have done a lot better on some of those cases if I had known sort of what was going on, because there was a lot of hearsay that got in. There was some improper character evidence that I would have loved to seen you go after. And where's just Mr. Martini or whatever. That was really funny. He was pretty funny. I like how he said, I thought I got rid of that. When we pulled up a piece of evidence, I was like, oh boy, don't say that. But it was funny. Like from a judge's perspective, I'm like, okay, I kind of like it. Like, just go with it, thought I got rid of that piece of evidence. Makes you seem a little culpable, but it's okay. It happens. All right. Well, great job, everyone.
Okay. Hi, everyone again. My name's Bella. I'm a 3L at University of Wisconsin Law School, and I competed all 4 years at Miami University in mock trial. So I'm glad to be back doing this. Is like my first kind of judging experience since I graduated in 2018. So this has been great for me, even though it's like such a weird format, and I commend all of you guys for sticking with it throughout this because it's just such a different experience. I'll echo some of Sarah Ann's comments too about themes, for example. First of all, I filled out that comment form. So there's way more specific feedback in there. I think I honestly exclusively wrote like points of improvement, like bad things, not bad, points of improvement. So I did that for everyone, not just you. So like if you see that, I just didn't want to type all the good things that I was seeing. So plaintiff Martini reached his boiling point. I like it, like it fits well into statements and everything, but I kind of feel like if you want just like an outside perspective on that, it doesn't scream boiling point to me. It's not like this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and then all of a sudden he's like murderous. It's like this guy hated Genesis from the beginning. And like there was all those statements are so damning. And so if you can just like rely, I don't know what a good theme would be about, like they just didn't like each other. But I don't know if you have to say boiling point, because I feel like that's almost like proving too much, like all of these steps up into the boiling point. Like just focus on his mind was made up about Genesis and it wasn't going to change, and he wasn't going to stop until the wedding was off. And then spotlight being on the wrong person, I really like an alternative suspect kind of approach. I tend to agree that there isn't a whole lot about this Drew character. I mean, you don't have to obviously make a whole case about it, but it is a civil case. Like this, you can't get by with like a teeny bit of evidence like you could maybe in a criminal case. But I also don't judge on the merits alone. I know how these cases can be. And it seems like defense definitely has like the lower hand here in terms of the facts. So keep working on that, keep talking about it. Anything else you can add in about Drew, do, or maybe it's time to like just pick something different. And then, beyond that, my biggest point is always like, just like do more, especially on a video format. It's like hard. It's like everyone's just sitting and like speaking in the same volume, same tone. So when no one's like differentiating themselves, it's like really, it's like, am I going to give everyone sevens, or is someone going to do something to like make me want to give them more? So that's going to take some creativity, especially being on a virtual format. But I think it starts with witnesses. Like, I know that we can't, see your like mannerisms or whatever. And I was hardly ever a witness. So I know how difficult that can be to like kind of create a character and be convincing about it. But anything you can do that will make your small little screen jump off the bigger screen, I guess, please do it. And then attorneys, be objecting more, and be objecting like more like this is inadmissible, like advocate for your witness, advocate for your client. I really like I really liked objecting. I think it's a really easy way to differentiate yourself if you know what you're talking about. So just do that and be more insistent. Like if I ask for foundation and then you don't hear the foundation, re-object and say again, like this cannot come in. So that's really all I have aside from what I wrote in the comments that you guys can read. But good work and good luck. I guess this is your last round. So for you, it's over, but good luck with the rest of your season too.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate